we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, loads on the agenda today. Keir Starmer's just done his keynote speech here in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference, interrupted by a protester immediately who glitter-bombed him, but Keir Starmer then carried on. We're also going to be going over to Tel Aviv with Charlie Peters because there is an ongoing war taking place there, and that has escalated significantly in the last hour or so. And we're also going to be going shortly to Ray Addison, our reporter, who's out in London for us, because scenes have been taking place there of pro-Palestine protesters outside the Israeli embassy, and stories coming from Jews around the London area and no doubt elsewhere in the country as well, saying they just do not feel safe on the street. So we're going to have a look at how we've ended up here, really. But joining me now is the Labour Member of Parliament for Sheffield South East. It's Clive Betts. Clive, thank you very much for joining me.
No problem.
So your overall sense of Keir Starmer's speech then, you seem quite happy with it?
Yes, I mean, it was a tour de force. I think Keir set out his whole approach to a government which gave people hope and belief that things could get better. I think there's a lot of despondency in Britain today, a feeling that things just aren't working, public services are broken, their own cost of living are in crisis, people can't afford food for their tables, and I think he offered a hope that there can be a different future for people, the NHS working better, an education system working better, and working people sharing in any new prosperity that comes.
Is there not a concern, though, that they won't really be able to pay for anything that they've said?
I think he made it clear there's going to be hard choices and things are not going to change overnight.
Yeah.
He did talk about a decade of reform. A one-term Labour government for 5 years is not going to be able to turn things round with the long-term decisions, not the sticking plaster that he referred to repeatedly, the Tories have employed. It's a long-term plan to get things changed.
Is that a little bit of a get-out-of-jail card to say, look, the country's in such a mess, it's going to take me at least 2 terms to sort this out?
Well, no, I think it's realistic. You know, the public can see through rhetoric and what you might call bullshit, for want a better term. Can I use that on
Well, not really, no.
I've used it now.
It's all right, we're all adults here.
Yeah,
and,
I know.
I would just like to say, sorry if anybody was offended, carry on.
Yeah,
right.
the public can see through that. They know what the reality of life is. They can see that the waiting lists in the NHS are so long, they're not going to be fixed in a year or 2 years. You know, the last Labour government had 13 years, and it turned these things round, and it will take a period of years for a new Labour government to do the same.
OK, all right. When it comes to things like a windfall tax as well, you guys have been extremely hot on that. Do you think that's really going to work? I mean, it is. They're already paying tax about 75%. So when it comes to, you know, paying for a lot in this country, it's about non-dom tax status and it's about windfall tax.
Yes, and other things like it was mentioned the other day. Angela Rayner spoke about the extra money we can get out of some development sites to pay for new affordable housing. So yes, we've got to look for all those measures. Of course we have. And then, you know, what we will say, and it's a realistic answer, is once the economy starts growing, then there will be extra taxes, and it's how you use those taxes to make sure they aren't tax cuts for the rich, but they go to improve public services.
But the problem for me when it comes to non-doms is this, right? So HMRC publishes annual statistics on non-domiciled taxpayers. Yeah. According to these figures, there are 55,200 UK residents who claim non-dom in 2022. Yeah. That represented 0.08% of the UK population. Of those, there are basically 500 that are seriously wealthy. Right. And those are the ones that you want to tax. And that is underpinning your economic vision for fixing the NHS.
That's going to fix a part of the problem in the NHS to begin with. Of course it is, and we've got a particular aspect.
And then it goes away, doesn't it?
No. That will be an ongoing benefit each year. Because remember well, I don't think there's much evidence that they're going to walk away from that particular reason. Have we? Yes, but they're going to pay ordinary tax like everybody else pays, and I don't think that should be a problem for people who are that wealthy, as you just said. Yeah. So I'm pretty optimistic that isn't going to be a challenge to push people out.
The thing is, they could go. I mean, Portugal, Italy, and Spain are a few nearby countries who have massively more beneficial tax schemes for people who fit into that class of people, as it were.
Well,
why wouldn't they just go there?
We're pretty confident, and certainly I think Rachel Reeves gave a performance yesterday which would lead everyone to believe that the measures she's putting together, the financial arrangements, are going to be ones that actually work. I think most of us have got real confidence that Rachel is going to deliver on these things, and we should be looking to make sure that everyone pays their fair share, and where people are benefiting currently from tax arrangements that help the very rich to the disadvantage of working people, then we have to be on the side of working people.
All right, look, Clive, thank you very, very much. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and I think you've created a viral moment for us already. So it's Clive Betts. Stay there for now, because otherwise you'll be in the shot. Clive Betts there, who is, of course, the MP for Sheffield South. Right, OK, look, between now and 4 o'clock, we're going to keep you updated with what's happening in Gaza. These are live shots. Well, that was a clip of Keir Starmer, of course. But these are live shots of Gaza right now, OK? So more explosions taking place, or certainly Israel continuing to bombard there. It is also worth noting as well that this is part, according to Charlie Peters, of a much wider Israeli offensive into Gaza, possibly the start of some kind of land invasion, an incursion, as it were, into Gaza. For what it's worth, Hamas has said that they are going to kill a hostage for every single piece of Palestinian home that is destroyed. So watch this space. But now, Keir Starmer obviously made some big economic promises in his keynote speech at Labour conference. I'll be talking about all of that after your headlines.
Okay.
It's 3:33. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Well, the Hamas terror group has launched renewed rocket attacks on Israel, targeting the city of Ashkelon. These strikes were launched from the Gaza Strip a short time ago. The militant group warned residents of the southern city to leave by 5 p.m. local time, which was more than half an hour ago. Air raid sirens have been heard elsewhere in Israel. Its defence forces claim more than 4,500 rockets have been launched by Hamas since Saturday. The Israeli embassy to the US says more than 1,000 of its citizens have been killed in the violence. Well, the latest attacks come in response to an unprecedented barrage of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee. Israel's continuing to bomb the enclave. These pictures are from a port on the Gaza coastline. It is continuing to burn. Apartment blocks, schools and a United Nations building are among those hit by hundreds of attacks. The UN has warned Israel its siege of Gaza is illegal under international law, but has also said the abduction of hostages by Hamas is forbidden. 2.3 million people live there. The UN's warning of a mounting humanitarian disaster. Addressing the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, Sir Keir Starmer condemned the Hamas attacks.
I am shocked and appalled by the events in Israel. I utterly condemn the senseless murder of men, women and children, including British citizens, in cold blood by the terrorists of Hamas. This party believes in the two-state solution, a Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. But this action by Hamas does nothing for Palestinians, and Israel must always have the right to defend her people.
That's it for the moment. More news at the top of the next hour. More on our website right now. That's gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
A quick look at the markets. Today, the pound will buy you $1.2262 and €1.1565. The price of gold, £1,515 and 18 pence per ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 7,614 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Welcome back to Liverpool, where we are at the Labour Party conference. We've just heard from Sir Keir Starmer. More on that shortly, but as explosions caused by the Israel-Hamas war continue, back in the UK, the conflict is translated onto both protests and vigils. And a pro-Palestine demonstration took place near the Israeli embassy in London last night. We have seen similar scenes in Australia, where crowds were recorded saying some absolutely disgusting things about Jews. We've seen similar-ish scenes in Berlin as well, the Netherlands, but this was on the streets of London. Now, yesterday, the police were very keen to say that they didn't think that any hate crimes had taken place. I mean, I would quite like to have a closer look at that, because I don't quite understand how celebrating the, rape and death of the Jewish population is probably not a hate crime, but there we go. Ray Addison joins us now, GB News reporter, for the very latest on this. So Ray, a concern about lawlessness or, frankly, pro-terrorist sympathisers on the streets of Britain. What's the latest?
Yes, well, good afternoon to you, Patrick. You can probably just see just over my left shoulder the police van parked up on that private street outside of the Israeli embassy. Now, of course, there has been a police presence here today, including armed police officers and officers on motorbikes as well. They've been coming and going, and that's because of that protest, that pro-Palestine demonstration which took place outside of the embassy last night. It involved hundreds of people, groups including Stop the War and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. They were waving placards which said for, quote, end the occupation, and they were letting off fireworks, lighting flares as well. They've sprayed graffiti, Free Palestine graffiti onto the buildings behind our camera. They've sprayed that onto the road itself as well, and lots of stickers just littering the area. Now, in order to prepare for that demonstration, the police actually brought in these very heavy barricades, which I hope you can see just behind me as well. These very heavy barricades, normally they're not here. They're designed to stop vehicles from approaching these gates and getting too much access. We know that 2 people within this area last night were arrested as well. And today I've been chatting to members of the community, shopkeepers, local people here as well, finding out how they feel about what's been going on. I spoke to one Jewish gentleman who was saying that people have the right to protest, but what they do not have the right to do is to incite any kind of violence. I spoke to a woman who works on this road as well. She said their HR department had sent out an email saying that anyone who doesn't feel safe simply should not come to work. They should work from home if they're concerned that something might happen. Certainly shopkeepers here concerned and telling me that they fear that protests could just spark off at any time, and that's their concern. And you can understand that, particularly when we see some of the businesses here have been defaced with that pro-Palestine graffiti. Police officers telling me that they fear that this weekend could see a larger protest on Saturday, and they're obviously getting prepared for that in that sense. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she's asked police to increase areas in largely Jewish communities. They've done that, and of course we know that James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary as well, is urging supporters of Palestine to stay at home. He says there is no need for people to come out. It causes distress to the Jewish community.
Yeah, look, Ray, thank you very, very much. It's Ray Addison, the GB News reporter in West London for us. I am very, very, very concerned about what appears to be a groundswell of sympathy for a terrorist organisation and the eruption of euphoria at the scenes that we saw, Israeli women being abused and paraded through the streets, the massive loss of life. I think it's an absolute shocker. And it's happening not just here, but all over Europe as well, by the looks of things, and indeed in Australia. But Gideon Falter joins me now as the chairman of the campaign against anti-Semitism. Thank you very much, Gideon. Are you worried that we have just imported a load of anti-Semites?
Well, I think this has been a problem that the Jewish community has faced for some time, but the scenes that we've seen now are absolutely horrendous. What Hamas has done, news coming out today, for example, that they were beheading babies. It's very similar to what we saw with ISIS, and yet the idea that after an ISIS attack, a massive bloody ISIS attack, we would have people out on the streets of our cities, letting off fireworks, celebrating, jumping around, beeping their cars, dancing on the streets. It's just completely unthinkable, and yet that is what we have right now. We have people who are out there on the streets who have been celebrating, and one has to wonder, what exactly are they celebrating? Who are these people, and what are they doing in Britain?
Yeah, absolutely. And is it a hate crime?
Well, if somebody expresses sympathy for a terrorist organisation, then they're breaching British law. If somebody says, for example, that Jews should be massacred, or that the attacks that Hamas committed are correct and that there should be more of them, they're inciting racial hatred. And if those people are in Britain and they're doing those things, then they're breaching British law.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, this is happening across Europe. It's happening in Australia. It's happened in Canada as well. We are looking at some images that are taking place at the moment. That's Gaza, where there is continuing flames erupting, and we see an escalation of that violence. Look, Gideon, thank you very much. I'm sorry that it's so short and sweet, but we've got a lot to crack on with here at Labour Party conference, so thank you very much. It's Gideon Falter there, who's the chairman of the campaign against anti-Semitism. Right, OK, so Sir Keir Starmer just delivered his keynote speech, promising a decade of national renewal. What does all of this really mean? Focusing on the interests of working people, should they win the next general election, that is, pledging to get Britain building. Now, the Labour leader announced plans for a new generation of towns and suburbs. Who better to pick through the noise with economics and business editor Liam Halligan. Liam, thank you very, very much.
A boy from the suburbs.
A boy from the burbs. There we are, straight out of where it is. Anyway, so, right, 1.5 million new homes and a load of new towns. What's going on?
So, Patrick, you remember after the Second World War, Clem Attlee, the famous Labour leader who beat Churchill, he did spark a building boom in order to house people that were coming back from war. And there's this... Keir Starmer's trying to evoke the spirit of Clem Attlee again. He talked about those post-war Labour new towns. Of course, in the late 40s, throughout the 50s, The UK built places like Stevenage, like Corby, like Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes, the home of the roundabout.
That was the last new town that began in the mid-60s. But the thing is, Patrick, I'm a bit older than you. I'm 54. I know I look younger, but I'm 54. And we haven't built a new dwelling in this country, a new settlement, in my lifetime. And in my lifetime, the population of the UK has gone up by, 15 or 20 million people. So we do need to build new homes. And Starmer is tapping into that. He's trying to become the party of home ownership. He's trying to become the party that's on the side of young people who are renting, struggling to get a deposit together. You know the story. You and me, between us, know many of those people. Lots of them work at GBNews, indeed across the country. So it was a real flag in the ground, and something that made me smile. Keir Starmer says, and guess what, conference? We're going to fight the next election on growth. He's been taking notes from Liz Truss.
He must have been. He must have been. I think when it comes to how they're going to pay for a lot of stuff, I did have a Labour MP on just a little while ago who was adamant that they would be able to raise around £3.5 billion a year by taxing non-doms, and then that those non-doms won't leave. Do you think that Labour have costed these plans?
I personally think £3.5 billion from non-doms is, to use a technical term, nonsense. Why? Because a lot of them, I used to be an asset manager, I've come across a lot of these people, a lot of them are leaving already because they think Keir Starmer's going to win. People who are wealthy enough to live in this country but from overseas, but to establish themselves as what we call a non-domicile, so they don't pay tax on their worldwide income. They're not going to sit there and let the tax man come and clobber them. They're either going to move out the way or rearrange their affairs so they don't pay this money. And it's not just me saying that. There was a Treasury research report that the Telegraph reported back in June that said this tax on non-doms, rather than raising £3.5 million, it actually cost the Treasury £300 million. Because people would leave, they'd spend less money, they'd do less business here, do less investment. So I do think Labour has got a problem. They can't really spend any money, not least because financial markets are so tight. And like the Tories, a Labour government would be pretty cash-strapped. But I have to say, to be positive, there was a good atmosphere here. There's a lot of momentum here at the Labour Party. It feels to me a lot like, I started coming to party conferences in the mid-1990s. It feels a lot like the mid-1990s when Blair and Brown were in their ascendancy and people are preparing for power rather than preparing to protest. The key question for Keir Starmer, is he Tony Blair enough to keep that coalition together of the left who want more spending, more money, higher taxation, and the centrists in the Labour Party who want power.
And not having that money to go berserk with it. Anyway, right, Liam, thank you very much. Liam Halligan, still to come this hour. We will keep you updated on the developments on the conflict between Israel and Hamas. These are live pictures in Gaza. We're also going to be taking live pictures from Israel as well because they are exchanging fire. Hamas issued a chilling warning and a chilling threat to Israel, and we'll tell you all about that very, very shortly. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back. You are with me, Patrick Christys, here in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference, but it's all action elsewhere in the world as well, because the Israeli military have said that Hamas operatives have nowhere to hide in Gaza. We will reach them. This is live footage from Gaza, where missile strikes have hit a series of targets. We actually do have some footage for you of some earlier explosions in Gaza as well, so we'll bring those to you in just a second. But basically, Hamas has said that they will not negotiate with Israel whilst airstrikes in Gaza continue. They've also issued that chilling threat, which is they said that they're going to kill 1 captive for every Palestinian home that's bombed without warning. And earlier we did bring you those pictures of a big explosion in Gaza seaport, which is what you're looking at now. So we'll keep you updated. Charlie Peters, our reporter, is in Tel Aviv for us, so we'll go to him very, very shortly. But let's turn to matters a lot closer to home, right here in Liverpool, where I am right now. And it was Keir Starmer's big speech as him and his party have sought to distance themselves from Jeremy Corbyn's position on Palestine. Tom Harwood joins me now, our deputy political editor. Tom, once he got past the glitter, I thought he did all right.
It was extraordinary. I think, if anything, the glitter really got the people in the room on the side of Keir Starmer. He took off his jacket. He referred to the glitter on a number of occasions. There was a line in the speech about rolling up his sleeves. There was a line in the speech about not being the party of protest anymore, making that clear distinction between where the Labour Party used to be and where the Labour Party is perhaps now. But I thought what was particularly interesting is, again, it was quite a cautious speech, re-announcing a lot of stuff that had already been said, some rhetoric, some personal note about his old pebble-dashed house that he grew up in, about his working-class dad. Of course, he describes himself as the son of a toolmaker. And it was interesting to see that when it came to the policy that was discussed, it didn't really feel that radical, that bold, or living up to the rhetoric.
He was trying to make the point that they were competent, I think, isn't he? He's trying to make the point that the public can trust them, you know, when it comes to honesty and decency and all of that. That's what he's saying. The Labour Party is going to have a huge problem, though, and it's the finances that the country are in. They're not being left with a load of money this time.
They're certainly not, and they've spoken about limited and specific ways that they would raise money. But of course, their big growth mission depends on something that Keir Starmer did say in the speech. He wants to take a bulldozer to the planning system in this country. Although I think that the policy doesn't quite match the rhetoric. Let me just reach over for a second and grab this policy document that I've been handed by the Labour Party team, which talks about how they're going to deliver more housing. 1.5 million more homes, that's 300,000 a year.
Yep.
Now, this is going to be through new towns and, of course, extra powers for mayors as well. A bit of a planning passport, as they describe, for urban brownfield areas. But what that is some targeted, specific ways to do housing. What it isn't is sweeping planning reform. That's not getting rid of the whole system we have now. That is making the system work better in certain areas. And actually, looking at this policy, looking at what's in this document here, this is not a million miles away from what Michael Gove announced just a few months ago. If you remember the extension to Cambridge, the extension to Leeds, the specific areas where extra building will happen, development corporations and the like, targeted development rather than sweeping planning reform.
Okay.
Now, the rhetoric of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are very different, right? The Labour Party is talking about sweeping planning reform, the Conservative Party is talking about targeted policy. But in the actuality, in this policy here, the Labour Party is not talking about sweeping planning reform.
No.
They're talking about targeted building policy. That's the same as the Conservatives.
And the other big factor, again, is things like a windfall tax and non-dom status as well, being used to fund a couple of key areas, one of which is the NHS, the private schools VAT issue as well. They're saying that that's going to go to help fund the state system, etc. Do those things really add up for you?
Well, it's interesting. They don't raise much money at all. The non-dom status will raise between £1 and £2 billion. The Labour Party has been a little bit cautious, said £1.4 billion extra to the NHS. The NHS has had £50 billion extra in the last decade. Will £1.4 billion extra make all the difference?
And if that's just a one-off payment as well. Look, Tom, thank you very, very much. Expertly done. You're off to some kind of policy briefing now,
I'm talking to the Labour team to ask them the very questions that I've just been posing on air. We'll get some answers.
We'll have more. We'll get some answers. We'll have more from Tom Howard, our Deputy Political Editor, in the coming hour. Now, look, loads still to come your way. We're going to go to Tel Aviv. We're going to give you the very latest from Israel and from Gaza as tensions mount and violence continues to erupt. Those are some images now of Gaza port that has been hit by Israeli rockets. We are expecting massive retaliation into the Israeli settlements as well. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK.
Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick, Christys here at 4 p.m. on GB News with you from Liverpool at the Labour Party conference. But a massive escalation in violence between Israel and Palestine. We've got reports now live from Gaza of more explosions. That's at Gaza port. And there's much more of that as well around Gaza and, of course, parts of Israel as well as those clashes intensify. But here, back at base, Keir Starmer, well, he started his speech briefly before being interrupted by a man who glitter-bombed him and demanded that there was a people's house, and then they got rid of him. A massive security breach, an absolutely massive security breach. There's no two ways to dress that up. If somebody has seriously bad intent, that could have gone terribly wrong. So something that needs to be looked at. Another top topic for us is the judicial review of migrants going onto the Bibi Stockholm barge as well. Will we actually finally get people on this barge? Will the whole thing go down as another giant waste of taxpayers' time and money? So I've got all of that to get stuck into after your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Well, good afternoon to you. The latest story from the GB Newsroom is that the Hamas terror group has launched renewed rocket attacks on Israel, as you've been hearing, targeting the southern city of Ashkelon. These strikes launched from Gaza Strip a short time ago. You can see rocket fire raining down on the Israeli city in the south, in multiple mortar rounds landing in that populated urban area. The militant group warning residents in the southern city to leave by 5 p.m. local time, which was more than half an hour ago in Israel. Air raid sirens are being heard elsewhere in towns and cities across Israel. Its defence forces claiming more than 4,500 rockets have been launched by Hamas since Saturday. The Israeli embassy to the US says more than 1,000 of its citizens have been killed in the violence. Well, the latest attacks come in response to an unprecedented barrage of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee. Israel is continuing to bomb the enclave. These pictures, if you're watching on television, are from the port city on the Gaza coastline in the west. Apartment blocks, schools and a United Nations building among those hit by attacks today. And the UN has warned Israel its siege of Gaza is illegal under international law, but it also said the abduction of hostages by Hamas is forbidden. Back at home, addressing the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, Sir Keir Starmer condemned Hamas's attacks. Now, Israeli soldiers have been clearing the Kfar Aza kibbutz. That's one of the hardest hit areas of the Hamas attacks. Troops have been retrieving the bodies of civilians killed when Hamas breached the border from Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu describing Hamas fighters last night as savages akin to ISIS terrorists. Well, here the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK will support British-Israeli families.
We stand in solidarity with Israel and the people of Israel in the face of these barbaric acts of terrorism. And last night I went to visit a synagogue in London to express my support for the Jewish community in the UK. I was unequivocal with them that we will make sure that they feel safe at this time, and the police have been given very clear guidance and advice from the government to do everything that they can to keep the community safe. They will clamp down on any behaviour that falls foul of the law. I just remind everyone that Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation.
Well, speaking at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today, Sir Keir Starmer also condemned the Hamas attacks and said Labour believes in the two-state solution for Palestine.
I am shocked and appalled by the events in Israel. I utterly condemn the senseless murder of men, women and children, including British citizens, in cold blood by the terrorists of Hamas. This party believes in the two-state solution, a Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. But this action by Hamas does nothing for Palestinians, and Israel must always have the right to defend her people.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer was also heckled by a protester who threw glitter just as he began his speech. Take a look.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house.
You can hear the voice there of the protester as he was wrestled to the floor by security staff. The Labour leader quickly moving on, taking his jacket off and going on to promise a decade of national renewal if Labour got elected at the next general election. Sir Keir Starmer warned the way back from 13 years of Conservative government would be hard, but the country could recover. And he pledged to build a better Britain and announced plans to create new towns and more homes. He also focused on the UK's economic growth as he laid out Labour's plans for Britain's future.
Do not doubt that the fire of change still burns in Britain. The question is whether it lives on inside Labour, and today we show it does. Today we turn the page, answer the question, why Labour? With a plan for a Britain built to last, with higher growth, safer streets, cheap British power in your home, more opportunity in your community, the NHS off its knees, a Britain with its future back.
Well, in news away from conference, the government says it is now safe for asylum seekers to return to the Bibi Stockholm barge without confirming a date as yet. It's been vacant since Legionella bacteria were detected on board back in August. But local Mayor Carolyn Parks is set to challenge the Home Office on behalf of local residents who've objected to the barge being parked in Portland Port. She says she believes the government needs planning permission to use it. And finally, the UK and Ireland have been confirmed as hosts for Euro 2028. The joint bid was the only one remaining for the football tournament following Turkey's withdrawal, so it could focus on a joint bid with Italy for Euro 2032. 6 of the venues are in England, with 1 each from Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And 2 spots have been reserved should any of the 5 hosts not qualify, although England have requested to go through qualifying for the tournament. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back. Now, let's turn to the latest in the conflict between Israeli forces and Hamas. Israeli strikes have hit the seaport of Gaza City. This is live, so that's what's taking place there. But this follows Hamas threatening Israel's southern city of Ashkelon with a major rocket barrage and has warned residents to leave home by 5 p.m. local time. So that was 3 p.m. our time here, so that was about an hour and 7 minutes ago, and the barrage has started. Earlier, Hamas has declared that they will not negotiate whilst airstrikes in Gaza continue. The terror group have also threatened to kill 1 captive for every Palestinian home bombed without warning. And there are some unbelievably appalling reports coming out of Israel at the moment, which frankly are I think too distressing for me to mention at this particular moment in time, but the latest reports in Israel say that the death toll from the Hamas attacks has reached 1,000 people. I think that in reality is going to be a lot higher, whilst Israeli retaliation has claimed the lives of around 830 Palestinians. Let's go to Tel Aviv now and speak with our reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, frankly, some sickening stuff coming out of Israel at the moment. What's the latest?
Well, in the last hour, as you said, we broke the news about Hamas warning citizens in Ashkelon that there was an upcoming attack, an attack that they delivered on. But it went further than their warnings. It was a coordinated, complex attack across Israel. Air warnings were heard throughout the country in the southern, central and northern districts. And in the 10 minutes before we came on air, we heard reports of fire landing from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. Air sirens have also gone off in Tel Aviv, where we are. And of course, there have been those reports in Ashkelon, a ginormous rocket barrage firing over. Just a minute before you came to me, the UN reported that they had fired up their sirens on the border with southern Lebanon as well. So that was all within the last hour. And it seems that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, they have hit back. In the last half hour, we've seen reports of IDF airstrikes hitting targets in Gaza, where of course the Hamas government and its terroristic militias have a strict control over the Strip, and down its coastline in particular, where the IDF forces struck. It has also returned artillery fire, less precise, of course, than airstrikes into southern Lebanon, where it is highly likely that the people who were attacking the Israelis were parts of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a separate group from Hamas, but nonetheless very closely aligned, also likely supported by Iran in their developments there. So a significant outbreak with a complex and coordinated attack by Hamas terrorists, and then a sharp and no doubt devastating response from the Israelis.
Yeah, and this is going to continue in the coming hours, Charlie, isn't it? And we have had these threats from Hamas to say that they will kill a hostage for every building that is levelled without warning, they say. We're looking at Gaza now. I mean, clearly loads of buildings have been levelled. One would expect that the hostage situation could well take a turn for the worse quite quickly.
Yes, absolutely. There is death at every turn in this developing conflict, in this developing story. We have seen, Palestinians being knocked down by Israeli airstrikes, Hamas terrorists in their extraordinary and sickening attacks over the weekend from Saturday morning. As you mentioned at the beginning, at the top of the hour, some of the acts committed by Hamas in southern Israel in particular, in the kibbutzes, in the small farming communities there, frankly unspeakable at this point. But the reports coming through are very grave indeed. And now in the north of the country, we are seeing in southern Lebanon into northern Israel, more shelling and violence there. We know that dozens of IDF soldiers have died in and around those border regions, and even soldiers from Sayaret Metkal, which is the Israeli SAS. They share a motto, who dares wins. Their men have also suffered and died on that border, likely fighting again with Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So it's a widespread conflict from the air, from the sea, and on the ground. And the next phase is likely to be that much mooted invasion, the ground assault of Israeli forces into Gaza. And hanging over that likely invasion of the IDF into Gaza is, of course, as you've mentioned, the very precarious hostage situation. Hamas, in their assault of Israel on Saturday morning, picked up hundreds of hostages. They took people, dead or alive, and dragged them into Gaza. Many of them, we know, are being held there. And there was that threat yesterday that for every building and every strike conducted by Israeli air forces in Gaza, on the Gaza Strip, that they would execute a hostage. Now, we haven't seen any reports of that since, but online, many people have warned Israeli parents to tell their children to delete social media, as Hamas has issued a warning through its Telegram channels that it may start releasing extremely graphic footage of people begging for their lives, and we might see some of the really horrifying reports that have been floating around in and around Gaza and, of course, southern Israel, where many of these atrocities occurred.
Charlie, thank you very much. It's Charlie Peters in Tel Aviv. I'm going to go back to you, Charlie, later on this hour. So thank you very much for everything that you're doing for us over there. Incredibly disturbing scenes coming out of southern Israel at the moment. More on that as we get it. Now, Sir Keir Starmer did, of course, promise to bulldoze his way through restrictions to build a new Britain with new homes, businesses and NHS back on its feet. The Labour leader, who was confronted by a glitter-throwing protester before he could deliver his speech to the party's conference, which, by the way, will result in about 10 or 15 years' time of completely no-context clips, with us all wondering why the Labour leader, and possibly by that stage Prime Minister, decided to deliver a conference speech with glitter in his hair. But there we go. He praised the spirit of the British people despite the Tory project to kick the hope out of this country, promising to reshape the country with 1.5 million homes, new towns, modernised infrastructure, support for green industry. Sir Keir said the fire of change still burns in Britain and it lives on in Labour. Massive questions about how he's going to pay for any of this, but there we go. Now, joining me is the former Labour MP, Luciana Berger. Luciana, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, especially for a variety of different reasons, actually. We'll talk about Keir Starmer's speech in a minute, if that's all right, but I can't help but feel as though there's a bit of a cloud hanging over everything at the moment, and that is what's going on in Israel and in Palestine. And the spillover onto the streets over here as well. Some very concerning footage out of outside the Israeli embassy. Are you concerned about what that means for multiculturalism and integration and potential rise in anti-Semitism?
I mean, I've been horrified to see the scenes on London streets of people seemingly celebrating the most barbaric and horrific acts that we've seen that were perpetrated by Hamas, a terrorist organisation, when they went into Israel on Saturday, when they threw and they launched thousands of rockets into Israel. They went and beheaded people. They killed people in their beds, in their homes, in their bus stops. They took children and pensioners, women. It's unfathomable. I'm just now got through reports. I was in Israel just a couple of months ago, a quarter of a mile from the Gaza border at Kibbutz Kafar, and I'm just reading reports now of it's still a live and active situation at that community. The idea for clearing booby traps, and there are dozens of people that have lost their lives at that just one community on the southern border. So these are horrifying acts, and to know that on our streets that we've seen more than one video of people celebrating. What exactly are they celebrating? And if they're celebrating a proscribed terrorist organisation in Hamas, then that is a criminal offence, and they should and must be held to account.
Yeah, exactly. I think when I looked at it, I was enraged personally, because it just looked to me like what they were celebrating was the death of Jewish people, and that I find we should not have those kind of people walking the same streets as us, would be my view on it. The Labour Party has been quite strong on this so far. In light of your previous experiences with the Labour Party, how do you feel Labour have handled the situation so far?
I think the Labour Party have been extremely robust and unequivocal. We've heard first and foremost from the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, in the wake of the atrocities on Saturday. We've heard from the Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, the Labour Party unequivocally condemning these barbaric actions committed by a terrorist organisation, by Hamas. And as we've heard in the speech today, Keir Starmer taken to the stage and speaking up and speaking out for what have been the most horrifying of actions.
I mean, the party is different now than it was under Jeremy Corbyn, clearly.
It's completely changed. Yeah. This conference is incomparable to the last Labour Party conference that I attended back in 2018. It's unrecognisable from, I left the Labour Party and I cannot in any way compare or find any comparison. This is a completely and utterly changed party, and Keir Starmer has changed the party, and that's why he's ready to change the country.
I think that says a lot then. So 2018 was your last conference, you said, and then you've come back now, clearly feeling like the party has changed, possibly quite significant, I think. Let's deal with what Keir Starmer actually said earlier on. Yep. Well, initially, he didn't get to say much because he got glitter bombed, didn't he, by some individual who was ranting about a public house, or we need a different kind of politics, really. How do you think he handled that?
I thought he was outstanding in how he handled that. He just brushed himself off. and he gave the speech of his life. He physically took his coat off, he rolled his sleeves up, and he got on with it. And the response in that hall was extraordinary.
He said something along the lines of, if he thinks that'll bother me, he doesn't know me at all, which was pretty good, I think, you know.
He also said in response, and it wasn't scripted, he said, that's protest and we're the party for power.
You know, that was interesting. It was, because he did say that. He said, this is why we've changed the party. Yeah. This is why. I think the implication there that there was quite a lot of that fringe nuttery a few years ago, really, and that's gone.
Well, you can't do anything shouting from the sidelines, and you can't be a party of protest. And today we see a completely different party, a change party, a party that Keir Starmer has changed to make this a party that's ready for government. And he went on to set out in his speech today what his plan is for government, how we need and will see under his leadership a decade of renewal, that we've got a party that brings back hope to this country.
Yeah. I think some people might be thinking, good grief, is he already saying it's going to take him 2 full terms just to sort the mess out that we've got at the moment, where people might want to see a bit more immediate action?
Well, yes, but there's a lot to do, and he set out a very ambitious plan and lots of different components of it, whether it's that creating Great British Energy, which is going to find its home in Scotland. It's going to ensure that we're creating in this country, generating our own energy rather than importing it from countries run by dictators. We are all suffering, paying extraordinary household energy bills today. It's Keir Starmer and his team that have come up with the answer to how we can actually tackle that and make a difference, and not just for us all to enjoy cheaper electricity and gas bills and see our cost of living go down, but it's also the thousands of jobs it creates and the opportunity which we've seen squandered under this current Tory government.
Okay, and I think I'm right in saying that Dale Vince of Just Stop Oil has said that he's no longer donating to the Labour Party, which is quite good timing, because for a little while that was a bit of a squiffy question mark over the Labour Party, I think, when it came to, well, hang on a minute, if you are taking money from a campaign group that sometimes causes civil disobedience, it's probably not the best look when you are trying to shape a green policy. So that appears to have stopped. I'm going to ask you, I don't know if you're in the business of making predictions, but I'm going to ask you, what is your prediction for the election then?
For when the election's going to take place,
no,
or
for the
outcome?
result. For the result.
I mean, politics isn't science, and anything can happen in politics. But I think certainly reflecting on the polls and listening to the country, and I spend a lot of time. I hear this has been my home for 10 years, and seeing to meet my friends from the northwest, spend lots of time across the country. There is such an utter desperation of wanting a change, and not just a change for change's sake, but wanting someone that's going to have grown-up politics, that's going to show integrity. What we heard from Keir Starmer today is a stop and an end to this sticking plaster politics. We need to have that vision to make the jobs for the future, the change for the future, the hope for the future. And on that basis, very, very, very cautiously, and looking at the polls that have shown a Labour lead for a number of months, I think that we're on the precipice of a Labour government, but I'm not complacent. And history teaches us, 1992 teaches us that we drink the Kool-Aid, what looks like 13 months out. That's not a good thing to do. So you've asked me the question.
I have.
I'm extremely, extremely cautious, but I think if you contrast what we hear and see today in this conference objectively compared to the malaise and just the kind of what we saw.
Well, a different vibe.
Everyone has said it's a different vibe. Again, you can't contrast what has happened.
I think there was. If Rishi Sunak's big serious things were more A levels and a couple of bits and bobs like that. I was banning smoking. I just found that a little bit bizarre. That's not, of course, to say that there are criticisms of Keir Starmer as well in terms of the finances. We're going to have to leave.
Rishi Sunak was right though, because what he said last week is that we need change.
Well, there you go. All right, okay, got that one in the end. Now, Luciana, thank you very much. Great to have you on. Is the former Labour MP Luciana Berger. Now, coming up, we are still getting reaction to Keir Starmer's speech. I will be joined by Jonathan Ashworth, the Shadow Paymaster General. Plus, we will keep you up to date with everything going on in Gaza as well. Both sides are hit with more missile strikes. Those are live pictures. That's the port in Gaza, one of numerous different places that have been hit. But on top of that, Israel is now facing a coordinated attack, including from inside inside Lebanon, to which it has responded. So a serious escalation. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back. It's Patrick Christys live at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, where just over an hour ago, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer made his initially disruptive speech, where he went on to pledge economic growth, more houses, safer streets, a transformed NHS. Well, I'm very pleased to say that I'm now joined by the Shadow Paymaster General, Jonathan Ashworth. Jonathan, thank you very, very much. I mean, how's he going to pay for all of this?
Well, we're going to grow the economy, because we need to get economic growth in our economy. But all the spending commitments we've made, the specific spending commitments, like our plan to deliver 2 million extra appointments in our National Health Service, or our plan to recruit more specialist teachers for our schools, we've outlined how we're going to do that. We are going to take some tough decisions. We're going to deal with something called the non-dom tax status. We are going to look at VAT and school fees. These are tough decisions. I know not everybody supports them. But when money is tight, we do have to take some tough decisions.
To be fair, the Treasury doesn't support it. It says that far from raising £3.2 billion a year in taxes, that's, of course, if none of the non-doms leave between now and then, they say it might actually cost us because they would leave or they move the money elsewhere, and therefore we wouldn't even be generating tax revenue from them.
But there were plenty of think tanks and outside experts who think that money can be raised, and we want to raise that money because there's also a principle that if you live and work here, you should pay your taxes here. And look, I'm not denying that there were people who oppose this, and I know it's a tough decision, but we've got to take tough decisions for the future of this country.
I mean, if it doesn't work, and it's based off a University of Warwick study, I believe, this policy. So if you kind of bet the house on a University of Warwick study and it doesn't work, you're going to be in trouble, aren't you?
Well, you're asking me to engage in a hypothetical, but we believe it will work. And we believe the investment is good, because if you get 2 million appointments in the NHS, there'll be viewers of GB News today who are probably struggling to have maybe a hip replacement, a knee replacement, a hernia. Getting those operations done more quickly would be great for GB News viewers.
OK. Building new towns. This is interesting. So we're just going to have a load of new towns. I suppose that is a way of making it sound more palatable than saying we're going to tarmac over the green belt.
Well, we're not going to tarmac over the green belt. There's bits of the green belt we believe are actually better named the grey belt. I think there's a bit of Tottenham where it's an old disused petrol station designated as green belt. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
We need to be building houses for people. And I want people who are watching GB News today who have been denied the dream of home ownership. I want to help them get on the housing ladder, so we're going to build more homes for people. Home ownership's really, really important. If you own a home, it transforms your horizons.
Oh, it does, especially when it comes to things like starting a family and all of that stuff. I mean, absolutely, having a stake in society.
And that's what we're in politics for, because we want to support people to start a family, build a home, build a life. Build a life for themselves.
And he did mention, didn't he, these people that he meets who are saying it's survival mode, you know, and that's no real way to live. So obviously he wants to change that. I've got to ask you a bit about this protester who glitter bombed him at the start. I mean, immediately, as soon as he walked on stage, all joking aside, it was a massive security breach.
Well, I presume they'll have to be looked into. But I did think the way he just brushed it off, took his jacket off, rolled his sleeves off. He didn't flinch. You know, if this guy thought he was going to knock Keir Starmer off course, then he had misjudged the calibre and the mettle of Keir Starmer.
As I was saying before, you know, it's going to be quite funny in like 10 years' time with no context to see a Labour leader with glitter in his hair doing a speech and no one's going to remember why. But no, it didn't put him off his stride, I suppose. I mean, massive question marks as to how he was able to get on stage and spend so long on that stage, but there you go. Just one of the other ones I want to get you on, if that's all right, is about windfall tax, because apparently this is going to end up raising quite a bit of money for you guys. Is there not also a concern, though, that we're going to end up seeing no new oil and gas exploration because these companies are going to just disappear? They're already being taxed at something like 75%.
Well, first of all, you know, gas and oil exploration will continue. We've talked about licences in the future, not the existing licences now in the North Sea. But we also know a lot of these businesses are also moving into the renewable energy sector as well. And I think we can create really good, well-paid jobs in this sector for the future. OK, there are a couple of little things when it comes to things like freezing council tax, for example. So Labour apparently would freeze council tax. Well, that was a proposal we put to the government for I think last year or earlier this year, around that's what they could have done with that money, because we know people were really struggling with the council tax. The government didn't take up that offer, that suggestion of ours.
When you look at Birmingham Council, for example, got about an £800 million shortfall. Slough Borough Council's in massive trouble as well, hundreds of millions of pounds.
There's loads of them in trouble.
Yeah, there are. I mean, if Labour councillors can't run their own finances.
I mean, the Tory councils are in trouble as well. I mean, I can see where you're taking
it. It's a valid question.
It's a totally valid question. I'm not knocking your question at all. But there's also plenty of Tory councils who are in similar trouble as well. I mean, there is an issue around the way in which local government is financed, and I mean that is an issue of that we've had for the last 13 years of Conservative government. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I jumped in there. I shouldn't have jumped in.
No, it's all right. Well, you know what I was going to ask. You know what I was going to ask you anyway. Right, I'm going to ask you to predict the next election result then. Come on.
I'm not a betting man. I'm not, you know, here's my tip, don't bet on horses, you lose money.
OK, all right. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, muchly appreciated. Take care. Jonathan Ashworth there, who is the Shadow Paymaster General. Right, loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including after last night's huge demonstration in support of Hamas and the Palestinian cause. I am asking, does the UK have an anti-Semitism problem? I think it's worthwhile us dwelling on that for a little bit. But first, it's your latest headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. And the top stories. Hamas has launched rocket attacks on Israel today, targeting the southern city of Ashkelon. The missiles were fired after the terrorist group warned residents to leave the city by 5 p.m. local time. Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system was used to intercept many of the rockets, but Israel says more than 1,000 of its citizens have died since Saturday. Well, those latest attacks come in response to an unprecedented barrage of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee. Israel is continuing to bomb the territory with hundreds of attacks. If you're watching on TV, these pictures from a port on the Gaza coastline from about an hour ago. In other news, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has promised a decade of national renewal if his party is elected at the next general election. Addressing the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today, he pledged to build a better Britain and announced plans to create new towns and build more homes. Those are your latest news headlines. More for you at gbnews.com.
These shocking events of the Israel-Hamas war have translated into both protests and vigils in the UK. A pro-Palestine demonstration took place near the Israeli embassy last night, while a Jewish community vigil for Israel was also held in Westminster. Jewish schools in the capital have even stepped up security. I mean, depressingly, they've even told students that they can refrain from wearing their blazers in public so as not to emphasise their faith. I mean, when did we become this kind of country, you know? Joining me now is the director of Maidenhead Synagogue, it's Rabbi Jonathan Romain, and journalist and contributor to the Jewish Chronicle, it's Sandy Rashti. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Great to have you both on the show, of course, albeit for absolutely devastating reasons. Sandy, some shocking news coming out of Israel at the moment, literally right now. We understand that, I mean, there's some horrific footage of what appears to be people having been burned alive, and absolutely just sickening things taking place at the moment. I'm going to ask you to comment on what's going on closer to home, though. How do you feel at this idea that we clearly have a cohort of people in Britain who want Israel and, dare I say, Jews wiped off the face of the earth?
It doesn't make me feel good, but I do think it's true. So I think British Jews have, in a large part, a wonderful life here. We have Jewish schools, we have kosher restaurants, we have kosher butchers, we have synagogues that we can freely go to. The systems, the institutions, the charities, they're all in place there for us to have a wonderful life in Britain. And as I said, in a large part, we do. However, and it's a big however, whenever there is tension in the Middle East, especially in Israel, but not always, but especially in Israel, it does seem to have a disproportionate impact on Britain's Jewish community. So, for example, we can freely stroll to a kosher restaurant, but it's highly likely that there'll be a convoy of cars driving past shouting Allahu Akbar. You know, for what reason? For what reason? I was taking my kids to the park in Golders Green the other day, the day after the attack. We're reeling, we're speaking to relatives in Israel. The kids are running to the swings, and that's what we hear, cars driving past, honking, waving Palestinian flags. Religious Jewish boys are not wearing the kippah. Sorry.
Yeah, and I do think as well the reluctance by certain media outlets to say what is happening in Israel is it's a terrorist attack by a terrorist organisation, I think speaks volumes. But I'm going to go to you now, Rabbi Jonathan Romain. Yeah, again, you know, should it be a hate crime, do you think? Should Europe as a whole be worried that we have imported a lot of people who clearly hold anti-Semitic views?
Well, let's leave aside the people, but certainly the anti-Semitic views are very bad indeed. And there is this unfortunate correlation between Israel and Jews. There's a lot of Jews who have a connection with Israel, but it doesn't mean to say they're responsible for Israel. And time again, you will get people who are perhaps against Israel or against Israeli policies, who then sort of identified British Jews as being, responsible. I'm often asked, why are you sending missiles into Gaza? Like me, personally, as if I'm a general in the Israeli army. So yes, I care about the land of Israel, the people of Israel, Whether I agree with the government of Israel is a totally different matter. So there's this overlay, but the connection, a false responsibility of seeing British Jews as responsible for Israel. And that, unfortunately, can then tip over from a political argument into a religious hatred. There's a legitimate criticism of Israel, as is every country, including our own. But when that then tips into hating someone who is Jewish just because they were Jewish, then you have to ask, well, is this actually anti-Semitism being disguised as anti-Zionism? And that's why there was such a try 3 years ago during the Corbyn years, when there was this worry that what was, until then fairly limited anti-Semitism was seemed to be moving centre stage, and why we're so pleased that he's gone and Labour seems to have turned the corner.
So Sandy, I'll bring you back in now. Is there a valid criticism of Israel, do you think? And where is that line? Where is that line, I suppose, between supporting Palestinians and being anti-Semitic?
Well, in answer to your question, and something that I have a lot of respect for, spoken about, I don't think that every sentence when it comes to anti-Semitism should be, oh, I know we don't agree with all the actions of the Israeli government, but please don't kidnap and justify the rape of our... it shouldn't have to be a precursor to every defence when it comes to Jew hate. It shouldn't have to be, I'm a British Jew, I'm got nothing to do with Israel. There always has to be the defence before there's anything else. And actually, you also mentioned people that, I suppose you're talking about immigrants, you said people that are brought to the UK. I actually think the issue has got a lot to do with people who are born and bred in the UK. If you walk down the Edgware Road on the night that it was all breaking, all the news of the Israel attacks, there were fireworks being set, there were fireworks going off in celebration, people were handing out sweets. There was another Israel-Gaza war a few years ago. We went into an Arab shop to pick up some things that we liked eating, and they also started handing out sweets in celebration. And I can tell you the people that were handing them out were born and bred in Britain. So there is, to my mind, a very significant, clear issue. I don't know if it's education, I don't know what it is, but to say there's not an issue and to have to justify it every time with criticising the Israeli government shouldn't be right.
Okay, I mean, there is an issue. There is an issue. We've seen, I think one of the most grabbing pieces of footage that I saw anyway was from a refugee camp or a processing centre on one of the Greek islands. They were all in there cock a hoop, dancing around, jumping around, screaming all the kind of usual slogans. And I thought, well, these people are going to be coming with their views to a country, potentially our country. I'm just not sure that's the right thing. Rabbi Jonathan, I'll throw it back to you. Are Jewish school children currently not safe in Britain?
Well, can I just answer the previous question a bit more strongly and say that it's perfectly legitimate to criticise Israel. The biggest critics of Israel are in Israel itself. And half of the Knesset Parliament, half of the population are opposed to the government of the day, whichever day that is. But there's a very big difference between criticising a policy of Israel and calling for its destruction. And that's the difference. And Hamas and Iran are actually calling for the destruction of Israel. It's not an argument about this border or that border. It's actually saying you do not deserve to exist. So it's on a totally different level. And Sandy's quite right. I mean, what was happening in the streets was quite appalling because these people were actually celebrating savagery. They were celebrating the fact that women, children were being kidnapped, taken off hostage. And it was very evident from Hamas's own footage. Their own evidence was that they weren't attacking military personnel, they weren't attacking military depots, they were just going into the streets and gunning people down, or they were going to this music festival and just shooting indiscriminately. That's not war, that's criminal action, that's against Geneva Convention. It's actually crime against humanity. It's a term that's easy to band around, but I think we're actually seeing it in the Hamas attack on Israel at the moment. And so anyone who celebrates that and celebrates that brutality and savagery, you really have to question their morality. It's not politics, it's one with a slightly different atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of.
sorry.
Sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. Apologies. I'm going to have to just cut across you, I'm afraid. Sorry, because we are out of time. But can I just thank both of you for coming on and just having such a robust discussion about it. It's great to have your insight as well, and obviously take care as well as the director of Maidenhead Synagogue, Rabbi Jonathan Romaine, and journalist and contributor to the Jewish Chronicle, Sandy Rashti. There's plenty more still to come on this show. Some unspeakable situations taking place as we speak in Israel and Gaza. Reports of infants having been killed and reports of people having been burned alive. There is a serious ongoing escalation now. What you're looking at there is live images from Gaza port. That was where an explosion took place. But elsewhere in the country, we are hearing reports of another incursion into Israel by Hamas terrorists. Apparently they are in the town of Sodot. Also, rockets being fired in, that fire being returned, by the way, from Lebanon. So a joint pincer-style attack at the moment in Israel. We will have the latest for you. I'm Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back to Liverpool. I'm here at the Labour Party conference. Now, the Mayor of Portland, Carolyn Parks, has been taking on the Home Office about migrants returning to the Bibi Stockholm, the controversial barge station there. The Home Office said asylum seekers will be sent back there from October the 19th. Look, acting in her capacity as a private citizen and a local resident, she is arguing that the use of the barge breaches the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 and should therefore not go ahead. I've just been reliably informed by our Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood that Keir Starmer devoted 6 words to illegal migration in his conference speech here. I'm going to go now to GBNews' national reporter who was listening to the proceedings at the Royal Courts of Justice, Theo Chikomba. Theo, what is the latest, please?
Yeah, well, a very good afternoon to you. So, as you rightly mentioned, Mrs. Parks was essentially here at the High Court in an attempt to get a green light to take on the Home Office. And the court heard today from both sides, actually, and Alex Goodman, Casey, who's representing Ms. Parks, covered a range of grounds. And he said she's deeply concerned by the planned accommodation of around 500 asylum seekers on the Bibi Stockholm barge by the Home Secretary. And she said, especially by the fact that the Home Secretary proceeded on the basis that she did not require planning permission without any adequate consultation with the local community. And on the other side, representing Mrs. Braverman, Paul Brown Casey said this. He said he argued that Ms. Parks' claim was out of time, without merit, and said that the judge should refuse to give permission to the challenge to proceed to trial. Now, of course, the hearing finished about an hour ago. The judge has said his decision is likely going to be made tomorrow. Whether or not it is going to be granted to give Ms. Parks the green light, it's unclear. In the last couple of weeks, she spent time asking people to donate towards her legal payments, of course, and raise around £25,000. If this does get the green light, what could happen next is yet to be seen. But of course, Ms. Parks was here today and she said it's yet another wait.
OK, Theo, thank you very much. Theo Chikomba there reporting outside the Royal Courts of Justice. Now, Sir Keir Starmer promised a decade of national renewal in his Labour Party conference speech earlier, pledging to get Britain building again with promises to create new towns and suburbs and 1.5 million new homes. I've got our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, here, alongside our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood. Liam, I'll start with you. Get Britain building.
He was trying to evoke the spirit of Clem Attlee after the Second World War. Patrick, he talked about let's build more post-war Labour new towns. We haven't built a new settlement in this country in my lifetime, and I'm 54 years old, and the population since I was born has gone up by about 15 million people. So clearly Labour's trying to be the party of home ownership. I have to admit, I'm surprised he didn't talk more about social housing, council housing, affordable homes. He was just talking about new homes in principle. But this will go down well with a lot of developers, a very powerful lobby. It may not go down so well with landowners, by the way.
Yeah.
He was talking about, he used coded words, development corporations. They're organisations that can basically take land off landowners using compulsory purchase orders. So that aspect of this might be quite controversial.
It may well be. Now, Tom, you scurried off and got into a policy huddle with the Labour top team. Last time you were on the show, you were tearing strips off their building policy. They were saying that it's basically what the Tories want to do. Go on, what's the latest?
Well, I've basically had my theory confirmed. Now, this isn't a value judgment. Some people would say this is the right policy, others would say it's the wrong policy. What it isn't is sweeping planning reform. This is working within the planning system that we already have, going back to how we used to build new towns in the 1960s, for example. That's very, very different from the words in the speech of Sir Keir Starmer. He talked about taking a bulldozer to our system of planning, and yet the policy detail is about working within that system, building new towns here, doing some densification there, but ultimately not wiping away the Town and Country Planning Act and not introducing a system of zoning.
OK, all right, and there was very little mention of things like immigration in that.
5 words.
5 words. 5 words. So
5 words, one of which was of.
Right, OK.
The whole thing was very light on detail and very light on spending pledges. The fact that it was very light on spending pledges will have pleased financial markets, who, of course, in the background to this conference, bond yields are borrowing costs, government are escalating. So I think there was some relief that he doesn't seem to be wanting to return Labour to lots of tax and spend. We're going to We're going to fight the next election on growth, he said. Sounds a bit like Liz Truss.
It sounds a little bit like Liz Truss. What's the mood like, Tom, in that policy huddle then? Are they feeling confident? They feel like they've backed a winner here?
They were certainly feeling confident. I was told that after the speech, Keir Starmer went back to his hotel with his wife. Bit of calming down time, perhaps, after the extraordinary start to that speech. He was meant to do a walk around after that speech. He was meant to come down. There was what's known as a steady cam there, ready to follow him out into the audience. He ended up not doing that and staying up on the stage. And there's some speculation there. That's because of some worries about the security here in this conference.
I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful.
Remember what happened to Theresa May, right? When somebody tried to give her a P45 when she was doing her speech. You have to ask, look, we like our politicians to be accessible. You know, we had to go through security checks to come in here, as do all delegates. But at times like this, you have to ask questions about the security. When a random punter, technical term, can get that close to the man who could be on anything.
Now, there's some news here as well. There has been a journalist who has been evicted from the press area at the back there. There was quite a huddle, quite a scrum as this individual was removed. Apparently had connections to the individual who threw the glitter over Keir Starmer. That's not confirmed, that's not verified. She was denying that. But the word on the street is that the protester came in with a press accreditation.
Interesting.
And he could have had others who knew what he was going to do. And that is the theory as to why we saw this journalist evacuated from the building in the last half hour or so.
Gosh, it's all kicked off here at Labour Party conference, hasn't it? So, OK, well, look, thank you very much, chaps. Great stuff, that. We are just going to return now for an update for you about what's going on in Israel and in Gaza as well. Fire has been exchanged on both sides over the course of the day. These are live pictures from the Gaza port. Now, Hamas have also been targeting the Israeli city of Ashkelon, and Israeli Defense Force rockets have been raining down on Gaza. Now, what the Hamas terrorists initially said was that everybody should get out of Ashkelon. You have until it was 3 p.m. our time to do that. They then actually went further than simply their threat of trying to level Ashkelon and actually launched attacks at other parts of Israel as well, including with rockets fired from Lebanon. Look, there are satellite images as well released by the Israeli military showing buildings in the Gaza Strip being reduced to rubble. That's what we're looking at right now if you're watching us on TV. An Israeli military spokesperson has said that Hamas operatives have nowhere to hide in Gaza and we will reach them. Gaza is being absolutely pummeled. There are some unbelievably concerning reports and distressing reports as well coming out of Israel about certain actions that may have happened there as the Hamas terrorists went through those towns and villages. More on that for you a little bit later on in the show, where we will also be going to Tel Aviv. Charlie Peters, our reporter, is on the scene. Their air raid sirens continuing to blare out. Plenty more to come. Plus, of course, like I said, the latest on Gaza. We're going to be talking about what's happening in Ashkelon. And we'll be reviewing as well a busy day here at Labour Party conference. I can sense some anger amongst the viewers in the email inbox there that Keir Starmer didn't really mention immigration. 5 words, one of which was of, not a major mention of arguably the country's major issue, but he was big on other things, building new towns, what he wants to do for the NHS. He used the word reform, didn't he? Again, a massive question is, how are they going to pay for it? Because there ain't really any money. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back to Liverpool, where you join me, Patrick Christys, at the Labour Party conference. We initially are going to focus on matters abroad because intensified fighting in Israel and Gaza. That is live imagery from Gaza port, where explosions went off. Massive amounts of bombardment taking place in Gaza. Huge numbers of casualties, but also as well a massive onslaught on Israel, some of which is being fired from Lebanon. Israel has returned fire. That on your screens right now, though, if you're watching us on TV, was Keir Starmer getting glitter-bombed earlier on, wasn't it? By a protester here at Labour Party conference just before his speech actually began. We'll be talking about all of that. Where was the security? Is it only a matter of time before one of our politicians is seriously injured? And of course, we will be taking a closer look, won't we, at the actual substance of Keir Starmer's policies. How can he pay for any of the things that he's telling us he will do? All of that coming your way very, very shortly. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon. The top story this hour: the Hamas terror group has launched renewed rocket attacks on Israel, targeting the city of Ashkelon in the south. The missiles were fired after the terrorist group warned residents to leave the city by 5 p.m. local time. Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system was used to intercept many of the rockets. Air raid sirens have been heard elsewhere in Israel. Its defence forces claiming more than 4,500 rockets have been launched by Hamas since Saturday. The Israeli embassy to the US says more than 1,000 of its citizens have been killed in the violence. And those attacks come in response to an unprecedented barrage of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, forcing nearly 200,000 people to flee. Well, Israel is continuing to bomb the enclave. These pictures that you can see on your TV screen right now from a port on the Gaza coastline, an explosion there causing a large fire. But we also know apartment blocks, schools and a United Nations building are among those hit by hundreds of attacks today. The UN has warned Israel its siege of Gaza is illegal under international law, but also said the abduction of hostages by Hamas is forbidden. Now, Israeli soldiers have been clearing the Kfar Aza kibbutz. That's one of the hardest hit areas of Hamas attacks. Troops have been retrieving the bodies of civilians killed when Hamas breached the border from Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has described Hamas fighters as savages akin to ISIS terrorists. Now, here at home, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the UK will support British-Israeli families.
We stand in solidarity with Israel and the people of Israel in the face of these barbaric acts of terrorism. And last night I went to visit a synagogue in London to express my support for the Jewish community in the UK. I was unequivocal with them that we will make sure that they feel safe at this time, and the police have been given very clear guidance and advice from the government to do everything that they can to keep the community safe. They will clamp down on any behaviour that falls foul of the law. I just remind everyone that Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation.
Well, that was Rishi Sunak. And speaking at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, Sir Keir Starmer condemned the Hamas attacks and said Labour believes in a two-state solution.
I am shocked and appalled by the events in Israel. I utterly condemn the senseless murder of men, women and children, including British citizens, in cold blood by the terrorists of Hamas. This party believes in the two-state solution, a Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. But this action by Hamas does nothing for Palestinians, and Israel must always have the right to defend her people.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer was heckled by a protester who threw glitter as he began his speech. Take a look.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house.
If you're listening on radio, the 28-year-old man concerned has been arrested. The Labour leader quickly moved on, taking off his jacket and continuing his speech, promising a decade of national renewal if Labour got elected at the next election. Sir Keir Starmer warning the way back from 13 years of Conservative government would be hard, but the country could recover. He pledged to build a better Britain and announced plans to create new towns and build more homes. He also focused on the UK's economic growth as he laid out Labour's plans for Britain's future.
Do not doubt that the fire of change still burns in Britain. The question is whether it lives on inside Labour, and today we show it does. Today we turn the page. Answer the question, why Labour? With a plan for a Britain built to last, with higher growth, safer streets, cheap British power in your home, more opportunity in your community, the NHS off its knees, a Britain with its future back.
Well, in news away from politics, the government says it is now safe for asylum seekers to return to the Bibi Stockholm barge without, though, confirming a date as yet. It's been vacant since Legionella bacteria were detected on board back in August. But local Mayor Carolyn Parks is set to challenge the Home Office on behalf of her local residents who've objected to the barge being parked in Portland. She said she believes the government needs planning permission to site it there. And lastly, the UK and Ireland have been confirmed as hosts for Euro 2028 Football Championship. The joint bid was the only one remaining following Turkey's withdrawal, so it could focus on a joint bid with Italy for Euro 2032. 6 of the venues are in England, with 1 each from Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And 2 spots have been reserved should any of the 5 hosts not qualify, although England have requested to go through qualifying for the tournament. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, I'm here in Liverpool for the Labour Party conference. We've heard from Keir Starmer, haven't we? Quite a lot to go into there. Yes, policy. Yes, questions over the money. Yes, there was a protest as well. But more developments taking place right now as we speak, every minute actually. Hamas have reportedly breached the Gaza border again. Terrorists from the group are allegedly engaged in a small arms fire battle with Israeli defense forces in Israel. These are live pictures of Gaza City. This was earlier today. It's obviously difficult to tell now because the sun's gone down, but that is Gaza City, and what you are looking at there is the smouldering wreckage of a boat at Gaza port. There are at least 830 Palestinians who have died since Saturday, and the deaths on the Israeli side now stand at least 1,000 people. It's worth noting that those figures there are a few hours old, so one can only imagine that those numbers have gone up. We can now go to Tel Aviv and speak to Charlie Peters. In fact, first, before that, I'm going to go to Ashkelon, which is a town which is there now. It is, yes. So what we are seeing there is, it would appear to me anyway, Israel's Iron Dome in force, I think. They're blowing up missiles in the sky. So that's Ashkelon in Israel. Now, Hamas, the terrorist organisation, told the people of Ashkelon to get out, and they gave them a deadline of 3 p.m. our time, which has passed a couple of hours ago, clearly. And then they are trying to bombard Ashkelon. We're going to go down to Tel Aviv. Charlie Peters, our reporter, is on the ground there for us. Charlie, thank you very, very much. Some significant developments in the last 20 minutes or so. It looks as though Hamas have broken through. They are in Israel again.
That's right. This morning, the Israeli government were triumphant, reporting that they had re-secured the border with the Gaza Strip. They spoke of combat engineers fixing the fences, laying down mines, and special forces and paratroopers clearing out the remainders of the Hamas militants in the Gaza enclave. However, it appears now in reports in the last 30 minutes or so that small arms fire has erupted between Hamas terrorists and the Israeli Defense Forces in Melfasim and Sderot, two towns very close to Gaza, maybe just 10 kilometers away from the borderline there. Now, it's not clear at this moment to what extent the violence has erupted, if this is a significant battle, how many militants are involved. I've heard from one source close to the Israeli government that it is now also involving rocket attacks, but obviously we'll wait for more developments to confirm. Other reports suggest that one Hamas militant has been killed at Sderot at least. However, we also heard reports last night and going into this morning from IDF security sources that there were concerns that some Hamas fighters had stayed behind after that devastating and appalling invasion early on Saturday morning. Over 1,500 Hamas terrorists have been killed by Israeli forces inside Israel in the last 72 hours. So there's a realistic possibility that some of those fighters have stayed behind, hidden themselves away in the towns and cities around Gaza, and could be restarting small skirmish attacks in the towns nearby.
Charlie, what's it like where you are in Tel Aviv at the moment? What's the mood like?
Well, many of the people who have fled from the kibbutz and the small farming communities near to the Gaza Strip, they've come here. This is considered the relatively safe part of the country. But when we arrived, barely an hour after arriving, the air raid siren was unleashed in Tel Aviv as rockets went overhead. Loud explosions were heard. We had to go down to the bunker in our building. And this happened again 3 more times. Again, explosions getting closer and closer. All knocked down, it appears, by the Iron Dome defense system that you referred to earlier. This is Israel's air defense unit. It can shoot down rockets in the air. Any missiles that come into its territory, it aims to shoot down. We do know, however, that it has not perfectly worked today. Rockets in Ashkelon that you referred to earlier, some of them did hit Israeli targets. Some of them hit, indeed, a hotel earlier. Someone I spoke to there said they'd evacuated because of the Hamas warning. Now, that is quite unique. Usually when rockets are fired in this region, it is the Israelis warning those in Gaza. They often knock the roof of a building with a dud weapon before 5 minutes later dropping a live weapon. Now it's Hamas warning the Israelis.
Indeed, Charlie, thank you very much. Charlie Peters there in Tel Aviv for us. We'll go back to Charlie for any more developments. Closer to home, here in Liverpool, at the Labour Party conference, Sir Keir Starmer promised to bulldoze his way through restrictions to build a new Britain. With new homes and businesses and the NHS back on its feet, the Labour leader, who was confronted by a glitter-throwing protester before he could deliver his speech at conference, praised the spirit of the British people, despite what he called the Tory project to kick the hope out of this country. I'm joined now by GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, thank you very much. That was a speech that could have been delivered by a Tory Prime Minister.
That's what I think, definitely. Apart from around the edges, how are you going to pay for it, wasn't answered.
Oh, yeah.
Take adding VAT to private school bills, non-domestic taxes being removed from very rich people who are here, who pay tax elsewhere. But otherwise, it was basically a speech which was not a fight to don't scare the horses. He gave an appeal to Tory voters: join us if you want to do this, this, and this, and rebuild the country. Even the ideas there on big garden cities and this kind of thing. These are exactly what the Tories were trying to do, build on scrubby areas of the green belt. This is what the Tories want to do. So they're trying to set this kind of idea of there's no risk by voting Labour, is what he's saying to the Tory party, Tory voters. And that's the appeal he's giving to the Red Wall. And he even said, if you want a strong and stable, or worse, that affects government. Now, we know what strong and stable, that was Theresa May's remarks, her slogan in 2017. Didn't end too well for her, so there could be a bit of hubris around this. Be careful here. It may not all turn out the way you want, but right now, it's basically a naked appeal to Tory voters.
A naked appeal to Tory voters is your big takeaway there. I mean, Tom Harwood's already gone through the planning and the building side of things with a fine-tooth comb and revealed that essentially they just want to tweak planning legislation. Exactly. It is not the bulldozing of planning laws or whatever that was alluded to.
They want to rewrite what are called local plans, Patrick. Local plans define where building can happen in your area within 6 months.
I tell you what, it's enough to make an insomniac drop off.
Your eyes glazed over.
Glazed over and sort of dribbling all over my own chin.
But you're saying, as you described, you're dribbling on your chin, but your point is correct. Where is the big idea, the big vision? Where is the pledge card? Where is the education? Where is what Blair said in 97, 96? It doesn't have that feeling here.
OK, all right. Just to cut across you there, Christopher, I'm afraid I've got some breaking news. Holly Willoughby has told ITV that she will not return to This Morning. I think it has been an honour to just be part of its story. She says, I now feel I have to make this decision for me and my family. She posted that on social media. So Holly Willoughby has quit ITV, or certainly This Morning. Anyway, so there we go. That breaking news for you. Just as a reminder, Holly Willoughby has told ITV she will not return to This Morning. I think it has been an honour to just be part of its story. She says that she now feels as though it's time to make the right decision for her and her family. That was in a post on social media. More on that as we get it. Well, why don't we remind you of some of Keir Starmer's speech after it was disrupted, of course. I can now speak with Siobhan Donna. But before I am, I'm going to play you some of Keir Starmer's, what should we call them, greatest hits? Is that right? I think. Anyway, here we go.
It's been 13 years now. And what does Britain have to show for it? Where is their minimum wage? Where is their Sure Start? Crime down by a third. More students than ever. Devolution, the shortest NHS waiting list in history, 500,000 out of child poverty, peace in Northern Ireland. I'm not going to do the whole list. I haven't got time. But isn't the contrast stark? 13 years of things can only get better versus 13 years of things have only got worse. Conference, this is what we have to fight. The Tory project to kick the hope out of this country, drain the reservoirs of our belief. That's why I started with our achievements. I wanted to remind everyone that there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, when questions such as, is Britain destined for decline, would have felt ridiculous even to ask. And I have to warn you, our way back from this will be hard. But know this, what is broken can be repaired. What is ruined can be rebuilt. Wounds do heal. And ultimately, that project, their project, will crash against the spirit of working people in this country, and they are the source of my hope.
Well, that was Keir Starmer. Yes, I can now speak with Siobhan McDonagh, the Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, and the MP as well for Birmingham, Selly Oak, Steve McKay. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. First things first, then, what do you make of the speech?
Great, policy heavy. People want to know what a Labour government would do, and I think Keir did a great job today on saying exactly what we'd be doing.
It's quite similar to Tories, isn't it?
Well, no, one exciting policy that I'm personally very thrilled with, because I've been campaigning on it for years, and that's building on the ungreen green belt.
Right.
We think there's approximately enough space next to London train stations to build 1 million of homes, and that would it would transform our city.
OK. What do you make of that? Do you think that he's presented a bright vision for Britain that people can go and get behind?
Absolutely. I would say it was the speech of the next Prime Minister. He was speaking to the country, and as well as being very good in policy, it was full of hope and aspiration, the very thing that's lacking in this country.
He said that a big one is that he's going to transform and reform the NHS. He said, look, I know a lot of people don't necessarily like the word reform, but there you go. How do you think he's really actually going to do that?
Well, I think the main thing is going to be about the faster application of technology in the NHS. He did say that we would be working 7 days a week, we'd be rewarding people properly, but it's about using AI, new treatments, new technologies, and bringing them to patients much faster.
OK, and one of the key points that he's going to fund a lot with is non-doms, OK? I'm just wondering if he's not necessarily telling the full truth about non-doms. So £3.5 billion roughly is what the Labour Party is saying they think they can raise. That does come from a study from the University of Warwick. And no casting no aspersions on the University of Warwick, I'm just saying it's a university study. And if non-doms leave, so specifically 500 of them who are right at the core of this, you're shaking your head, why wouldn't they? I'd leave.
Well, I don't think that's going to make them leave, isn't it? This is a benefit.
£6.5 million a year extra in tax.
This is a group of people who don't normally get this benefit in other countries. Is the Prime Minister's wife
they can get a very similar benefit in Spain, in Portugal.
Wife really going to leave? And then that brings us to the other issue, Patrick, doesn't it? If Labour, if Keir Starmer got up there and said he was going to do all these things and didn't tell you where the money was coming from, you would rightly say, oh, look, Labour's promising all these things and just not telling you where the money's
I do appreciate that. I think that's kind of the point, though, which is that I'm wondering whether or not there is going to be enough to pay for it there, and whether or not Labour are going to be left with, let's be honest with you, not a lot of money in the kitty, are they really? Could that be a problem for Labour, do you think?
Well, I think what he said was we're going to grow the economy. This is one area where we're going to tax to prime some of our activities. The other half of it is making the economy function properly.
He didn't mention, sorry, that was wrong. He said 5 words on immigration, one of which was of, apparently. Is that a problem for him, do you think?
No, because I think the problem with immigration is with the Tories. They spend so much time talking about it and fantasising about schemes that won't work that they're creating a problem for themselves. The issue about immigration is separating genuine asylum from non-genuine, and that means faster processing, probably outside the country, and tackling the gangs. If they did that, we wouldn't have an issue.
OK, do you think that was a misstep? I know a lot of people would have concerns about what Labour might mean for immigration, both legal and illegal. He didn't address that today.
But a really important issue, but he has addressed it in the past. He's made it clear that he is not in favour of the fantasy of Rwanda, and that he would ensure that our immigration system works. I know, Steve knows, because of our casework mailbag, is that there aren't... The applications aren't getting processed. The government can't remove anybody who's had a failed claim. The whole infrastructure in the Home Office is completely collapsed. And what we see is their government desperate for headlines, but not actually doing the day job.
It's like a pitch to get us out of the ECHR, isn't it, this?
No, it's about doing the job properly, of actually processing those claims and actually removing people who fail, just as we did last time Steve and I were in a Labour government.
OK, there is a sense, clearly, that this is the speech of a future Prime Minister. Rather, unfortunately for him, it will go down in history as him being covered in glitter for a bit of it, which will look weird out of context in about 10 years' time. A shocking security breach there, I thought. I just wonder what's going to have to be done with this, because I fear that it's a matter of time before someone gets really badly hurt.
Yeah, well, I don't want to spend any time on this exhibitionist clown. Let's not give him any attention. But there should be some concerns about the security and about the speed with which it was handled, yes.
Yeah.
And didn't he handle it well. I mean, it must have been terrifying, mustn't it? The first seconds you don't know where this is coming from. And I'd also like to give a really big shout out to one of our heroes in the Labour Party who's worked for Labour for 30 years. It was Carol Linforth who got up on that stage and got his jacket.
Right, OK. One more question for you before we have to go. Net zero. You're, I believe, quite opposed to ULEZ, is that right?
Yeah.
Is that not at odds with Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan, for example? So how do you square that?
Well, I don't think so, because Labour wants to achieve net zero in the quickest possible time, as Keir said. But also, as a party, we're not generally in favour of regressive taxes, which hits the poorest most. And that's, for me, the issue. I see people who work as carers, I see people who have their own business, who can't afford to use their cars and do the jobs that we really need them to do. So I'm really concerned for the livelihoods of quite a number of my constituents. OK. Both of you, thank you very much. Really enjoyed this. Great to have you on the show. Hope to chat to you again very, very soon. That is, of course, Siobhan McDonald there, who is the Labour MP for Mitcham and Morden, and the MP for Birmingham Selly Oak as well, Steve McCabe. Now, plenty more to come on the show. We're going to, of course, be giving you the latest updates from Gaza. An incredibly distressing scene that's taking place over there at the moment. So that's Gaza port. There's been an explosion there, which has been raging now, the fire raging for absolutely ages. But Ashkelon is kind of where the new action is, as it were. And we're going to witness scenes from there at the moment. Look, night has fallen, so it's quite difficult to tell, but my understanding is that appears to be the Iron Dome in action, at least in part anyway. Missiles, rockets have been fired into Ashkelon, and Hamas were urging everybody to get out of there. So incredibly distressing scenes. We'll keep you updated as anything else occurs. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. We are Britain's News Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
As explosions caused by the Israel-Hamas war continue, back in the UK, the conflict has translated into both protests and vigils. And this is a source of much concern for a lot of people. Have we got a rampant anti-Semitic core that appears to be celebrating the death of Jews and the evisceration of Israel as a state? Is that something that we should be concerned about? It's not just taking place here, by the way, right across Europe, right across the West. A pro-Palestine demonstration took place near the Israeli embassy in London last night, and we can go there live now because Ray Addison joins us. Ray, thank you very, very much. I mean, so the police at the moment are saying that, I believe anyway, there's no hate crimes committed, despite what appears to be people celebrating the death of Jews. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating and obviously fast-moving, developing story, Patrick. I'll come to that aspect that you just mentioned in just a second. As you were saying, hundreds of people here were demonstrating a pro-Palestine demonstration last night. The Israeli embassy is just down there. The consulate's down there as well. The ambassador's residence as well is just down this private road behind these gates, which you'll see there's this huge now barricades to prevent cars coming into this space and getting to that area when they're not supposed to. Now, these demonstrators, they were spraying graffiti over the walls of the buildings here, onto the roads itself, lighting flares, setting off fireworks, and obviously chanting as well, Free Palestine. Now, obviously, that's prompted a very large police presence, and today the Home Secretary has contacted police chiefs across the country, and she said that flying the Palestinian flag on British streets may not be legitimate. Now, there's a key element to this. She says if it's deemed to be a show of support for acts of terrorism. Now, she's urging officers to use the full force of the law if they see people doing the following: targeting Jewish neighborhoods, waving pro-Palestinian or pro-Hamas symbols, that of course is the prescribed terrorist organization Hamas, or chanting slogans that could be interpreted as anti-Israeli. Well, I've been here with our cameraman since midday this afternoon. There's been a couple of what I would describe as minor incidents. Perhaps there was a car that came along with a very large Palestinian flag sticking out of the roof. It came down the road, and then it did presumably an illegal U-turn, perhaps not, I'm not sure, but it did a U-turn and then it went back the other way, seemingly for no reason. A couple of seconds later, the police car actually came along in the same direction with its blues and twos going. So that was the first incident. And then secondly, about an hour and a half ago, we had a man who was stopped from walking down this private road past the embassy, and he was wearing a Palestinian scarf as a mask around his face. Now, he was stopped. 9 officers approached him. There was quite a long conversation, about 5-6 minutes, and then he was escorted past the barricade here and onto the public area outside the road. I grabbed him and I asked him what he was trying to achieve.
Going to pick up my car, and they stopped me because I'm wearing a flag.
Why are you wearing the flag?
Well, why the government, they're putting Israel flags everywhere? I'm using it as a mask. It's COVID, you wear it. Last year, this time it was obligation. This year it was like, I'm using it as a mask. Nice. They should deal with it equally now. They shouldn't put in Israeli flags then.
I've been speaking to local residents. They say that, in theory, protests are fine as long as they don't spark violence. I know a lot of shopkeepers around here are concerned that there could be further protests, and people that work in this area as well, they're being told they don't have to come in if they feel concerned for their safety, Patrick.
Ray, thank you very much. Ray Addison reporting from outside the Israeli embassy in West London. Yep, huge concern for people that there is a undercurrent and a growing undercurrent of individuals who clearly have very, very, very damaging views, to say the least, about Israel and, I would say as well, the Jewish population. But there's loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. The protest against plans to house migrants in a Wales hotel. Now, GBNews understands that the Home Office has withdrawn its plan following opposition from locals. A rare victory for local residents. So we're going to be talking about all of that, but right now it's the headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top stories this hour. Hamas has launched rocket attacks on Israel, targeting the southern city of Ashkelon, as you've been hearing. The missiles were fired after the terrorist group gave a warning to residents to leave the city by 5 o'clock local time. Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile system was used to intercept many of the rockets as they came raining down on the urban area. Well, the latest attacks follow an unprecedented barrage of Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, forcing nearly 200,000 people there to flee. And Israel is continuing to bomb the territory with hundreds of missiles. If you're watching on TV, these pictures from a port on the Gaza coastline with buildings and vehicles on fire. In other news today, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has promised a decade of national renewal if his party is elected at the next general election. Addressing the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, he pledged to build a better Britain and announced plans to create new towns and build more homes. And some breaking news to bring you. Holly Willoughby has announced she's quitting ITV's programme this morning after 14 years hosting the show. Last week, a shopping centre security officer was charged and remanded in custody over an alleged plot to kidnap and kill the star. You can get more on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's look now to see what world events have had in terms of effect on the markets today. The pound buying you $1.2285 and €1.1572. The price of gold is £1,513.70 an ounce, and the FTSE 100 has closed today at 7,628 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Welcome back to Liverpool, where I am at the Labour Party conference. Now, Sir Keir Starmer promised to bulldoze his way through restrictions to build a new Britain. He then talks about new homes, businesses, new towns, actually, and an NHS back on its feet. Lots of reform. The Labour leader, who was confronted by a glitter-throwing protester before he could deliver his speech at the party's conference, did praise the spirit of the British people. He was trying to instill and inject a little bit of optimism. I just find it staggering how easy it was for that individual to get near Keir Starmer and for how long he was there. You know, it's a matter of time before someone gets seriously hurt. It's a matter of time. Christopher Hope's here. You can hear him grumbling away in the background there. You're all right?
It was, I mean, the team around him were really up cross about it, because that could be anything being thrown at Keir Starmer. I was there when Nigel Farage, our colleague, had milkshake thrown on him. I think I was on the bus with him in York covering it for a different media organisation. And, of course, people he was really upset, right? But people thought, well, it's only milkshake, Nigel. Why are you so cross? But he has no idea what it is. Yeah. And that could have been any kind of harmful substance chucked at the Labour leader. In the same way, Farage could have been anything on him, and you don't know, and it's not very nice, and it's appalling that happened.
No, of course. No, it is. I mean, it is, and that guy's been evicted, and we'll have to, remain to find out exactly what the nature of his calls is and all of that stuff. But I think we can guess the individual there. In terms of the substance of what Keir Starmer had to say, so you could fit a Rizzler paper between the Conservative
Totally
Party
agree. I mean,
and the Labour Party.
no real difference now between two parties. You've got basically a new team will come in, but what they're offering is really what the Tory Party is offering most of the time. They want to build on scrubby bits of green belt. They want to try and help reform the NHS. These are things which we hear a lot from the Tory Party. They can't do it, and they're trying to be a new team around him. That's the point. Whether it works or not, I mean, we'll wait and see. He even said at one point we'll be almost a strong and stable government, or worse, that effect, which language used by Theresa May in 2017, and it went wrong for her.
There are massive question marks over how he's going to finance the plans that he wants for the NHS specifically.
And we don't know the answer yet. Borrowing, probably. Certainly no increase in income tax. So the usual things you might expect. There's no big rabbit there. Nothing, no real news. It's more of a mood music thing, a vibe.
You know, when Liz Truss said we're going to go for growth, and that is how we're going to end up paying for stuff, and everything melted down, disintegrated, and before you knew it, you know, there was a lettuce on the front of the Daily Star, and the rest is history. When Keir Starmer says it, everything's fine.
Well, that's right. Well, he's not in power yet, Patrick, to be fair. So we're a year away from him actually doing it. What was different with Liz Truss was she actually was in power. The markets weren't aware, etc. It went wrong. No, we know it's not a guaranteed win yet for the Labour Party. But I think hubris could come back and bite them. We don't see any. They define themselves repeatedly against how bad or problematic the Tories are. Any idea of why vote for us?
And a decade of renewal. I mean, what he is saying there, what I'm hearing anyway, is I will need 2 terms.
Put it right.
Just to sort this out.
The last time we heard that kind of comment was from Boris Johnson, September 2021. In their party conference, it was briefed that he would rule as PM for three different terms of government, 10 years. Look what happened there. He's gone within 9 months. Politics comes at you fast nowadays.
Politics comes at you fast. Well, following months of opposition from local residents and authorities, Carmarthenshire Council says that the Home Office has written to them to confirm that it's scrapping plans to house more than 240 migrants at the Stradey Park Hotel in Llanelli. We've covered this story right from the start. It's had a permanent base outside it of locals and concerned individuals saying they didn't want this site there. Clashes, it's fair to say as well, between security guards, police and people who are concerned. The proposals had sparked fury from local residents who had clashed with those police. As I was saying, in fact, 6 people were arrested last week. But you know what? It now turns out that apparently the council the Home Office is not going to use the site. So the council's leader, Darren Price, welcomed the scrapping of the plan, saying it was the right decision for the community and was time for everyone to heal from the experience. It is actually a very rare victory for people who do not want migrant hotels in their area, and a demonstration, I think, of what can happen when communities do stay together and bandy around. I'm not sure what will happen now to the actual hotel or the 95 people that originally worked there, and the fact is that I think they'd already carried out some refurbishment, so what kind of state the hotel's in, we do not know, but what a sorry state of affairs. Christopher Hope still joins me now. There wasn't a lot on immigration in Starmer's speech, was there?
Because there's no answer, because the 2 main parties haven't got a decent answer. We saw today, didn't we, the Bivvy barge being repopulated by people who, while they wait for their asylum claims to be processed. But you have these communities there thinking, well, why do we have to have these hotels filled by people if the government can't push through these plans?
It's not good enough, do you think, or will it be seen as good enough, do you think, by the potential future Prime Minister to stand here and completely swerve immigration?
His plan is a Tory light plan. He wants to try and... He's been out to Europol in The Hague and trying to work more closely with authorities on the continent. That's what the PM, the Rishi Sunak, is trying to do. But the big deal, the difference there is Rwanda. We know from the weekend that Mr Starmer will not do the Rwanda plan, even if it works.
Yeah, indeed. Lord Christopher, thank you very, very much. Christopher Hope there, our political editor. Now, coming up before 5, has Sir Keir Starmer convinced voters that he is a Prime Minister in waiting? If so, what would a Labour government mean for British people? That's what I'm going to be delving into, and we will have the very latest as well from the ongoing conflict in Israel and Gaza. It really has stepped up a notch there. I'll take you to the scene very, very shortly. Patrick Christys on GBNews, it's Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back to Liverpool. Now, let's reflect, shall we, on Sir Keir Starmer's speech to the conference earlier this afternoon. Why don't we remind ourselves one more time of this protester who interrupted the Labour leader's speech. There we go, covered him in glitter, knocking him slightly off his stride. But anyway, he went on to pledge economic growth. He pledged more houses. He pledged brand new towns, actually, safer streets and a transformed NHS. But I want to ask, has he done enough? And will a Labour government actually be good for Britain? Huge question marks over how on earth they're going to pay for it. And not the most convincing answers sometimes, really. William Atkinson for Conservative Home joins me. Now, I also have a broadcaster and journalist, Michael Crick, on set with me, so good stuff. I'll start with you, Michael. So what do you make of this then? Do you think that this is a good, suitable vision for Britain that the public will like?
I think he failed, really, in terms of things that would convince swing voters.
Right.
The people he's got to persuade. I think Labour's done lots to do that around the conference and over the months. But I think in this one speech, it was significantly inferior to the speech he gave last year, which I thought was tremendous. Today, I thought was a bit flat, a lot of cliches. lacking in substance, lacking in new stuff, you know, something to excite the people when they go home. But in particular, you know, if you're sitting at home thinking, well, I voted Conservative last time, well, I don't, you know, I'm worried about that. Should I vote Labour? There was nothing really that would...
So you found it a bit of a damn squib. I mean, the initial noise afterwards was like, oh, didn't he do well with the protester? Oh, what a speech. But then the dust settles a bit, doesn't it? And you think, well, actually, what's he actually
Of course,
said?
everybody around here says they're excited. And there's no point in doing vox pops with delegates afterwards. Whenever I used to do that, I used to say, OK, well, what was the memorable phrase?
Yeah.
It's difficult. I mean, full speed ahead was one memorable phrase I had.
Full speed ahead.
But it wasn't quite clear what we were going full speed ahead with what.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we were going full speed for a few different things, but I'm not entirely sure where we were going. I'm going to bring in now William Atkinson from Conservative Home. William, thank you very, very much. So, what do you make of Keir Starmer's speech? Is he a Prime Minister in waiting, do you think, regrettably for you at Conservative Home?
Well, I'd say if I hadn't been mad enough aged 15 to join the Conservative Party, that after watching Keir Starmer's speech today, I'd probably want to vote Labour at the next general election. I must disagree completely with Michael. I thought not only did Keir Starmer look relatively prime ministerial, or at least more so than he has in previous party conference speeches, but I also think he actually laid out a relatively coherent vision for government. Yes, questions are obviously overhanging how he would actually pay for all these grand pledges of reform in the NHS and in the education service and the like. But on issues such as security for your average family, or indeed on the international level, and making our streets safer, and most importantly for somebody like me, despairing at ever getting on the housing ladder, his pledge to build a new set of new towns and finally build on the god-awful green belt, then yes, I thought actually Keir Starmer was perhaps on the side of the British people. And I thought actually it was a very difficult pitch for the Conservatives to come back on, because, quite frankly, he was very good in pointing out where we've wasted the last 13 years of government. And that,
that is a remarkable summary.
Is the most depressing element of it all.
Yeah. It's a remarkable summary from you at Conservative Home. Michael can't hear you, so I'll fill him in. Basically, completely disagreed with you. He said that he thought that if he hadn't been stupid enough to join the Tories at age 15, he would probably vote for Labour now, and that as a young individual who's looking to get on the property ladder, it provided hope for him. That's interesting. So he might have swung a Tory voter there.
Well, I'm surprised, but... you know, that takes all sorts.
Not for you, though.
Well, you know, I won't vote Labour at the next election, but for very peculiar reasons. I've just seen how all the candidates have been selected. So, and I think there's danger of a Labour government becoming very authoritarian. And
go on, expand on that a bit.
Well, I mean, they basically annihilated the left. Now, you would probably argue, jolly good idea too. But I think that the Labour Party has always thrived. Good parties, good self-confident parties, thrive on alternative voices. And you've seen in past Labour governments, people like Barbara Castle, John Prescott, Nye Bevan, Michael Foot, Tony Benn, round the cabinet table. You know, OK, they have arguments, ding-dong arguments from time to time. But you do need some challenge within government. And the trouble is, with Starmer and his henchmen, is that they've eliminated almost anybody who's from the left. Quite a few people are not going to be coming back, like Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott. And amongst the new candidates, hardly any of them you can describe as left-wing.
Charlie Peters, who's live in Tel Aviv.
Far too authoritarian. And I think Boris Johnson made the same mistake when he was in power.
OK, all right, William, I'll throw it back over to you. Some concerns there from Michael that, you know, a Labour election victory could end up leading to quite an authoritarian government. My big concern with it is I'm not sure the sums add up in terms of non-dom status raking in £3.5 billion. I mean, even if it does, the jury's out on that. One would imagine it'll be a one-off payment. Then what do we do after that? That will be my big concern, what Keir Starmer said.
Well, like Michael, I spend my time also reporting on specifically Tory selections, and I can say that from the trend of selections that we've seen, the Tory party looks to become increasingly ungovernable, as we seem to be picking out candidates who primarily want to be backbenchers rather than future ministers, but there we go. I'd say that on the sort of question of whether the sums add up, this is the eternal question that people like me will always ask of a Labour government, and as I said about Rachel Reev's speech yesterday, pledges such as abolishing the non-dom status, for example, or VAT on private school, predicted by some calculations to actually cost more money than they'd raise. But nevertheless, I think if one is talking about this sort of broader agenda that a Labour government would actually have to follow, the particular pitch that Keir Starmer wants to make to the country, I'd say the average voter isn't particularly bothered about how he's going to pay for it because they're so sick of the Tories, they just want to chuck us out. So whilst the finances are obviously something that we're going to be poring over in years to come if we do indeed end up with a Labour government, I think for the moment, for the average voter, will have seen that, and they would have seen a man who was very clearly on his way to Downing Street, which is unfortunate for my party.
Well, I mean, gosh, strong stuff. Yeah, what's your take on the spending side of things, Michael?
Well, I agree with you, actually. I think this whole thing about ending non-dom status is actually, there's a hell of a lot of reliance on that. And I think they're being too optimistic. People are always too optimistic about what they can make from tax changes or closing loopholes. They're going to have to come up with some new, what Gordon Brown called stealth taxes. He was very good at always finding little extra things he could tax that didn't appear to cause much distress, and yet raised a significant amount of money. And Rachel Reeves, if she's clever, will have some of those in reserve that she probably won't want to announce before the election, or she may announce one or two just to persuade the sceptics like you and me, but that Labour's going to need some new sources of money. I mean, my own personal view is that in the long term they need to start thinking about a wealth tax, but they've already ruled that out.
Gosh, well, there we go. Look, both of you, thank you very much. Great way to round off the show. That's Michael Crick there, broadcaster and journalist, and as well as William Atkinson from Conservative Home. Well, I mean, I tell you what, I was not expecting the chap from Conservative Home to come out and say that he wished Keir Starmer was leading the Tory party and that he thought that it would be he's on his way into Downing Street, that he agreed with the vast majority of what he had to say, etc, etc, etc. So it is potentially a seismic moment in British politics that Keir Starmer is actually courting the Tories and doing quite well out of it. I will say that I think one of the remarkable takeaways, anyway, from this conference is that we do currently have a war in Israel. I'll show you some pictures live at the moment. I mean, the timing of this, certainly in terms of the Labour Party conference, couldn't have been more difficult for them. The Labour Party, historically very squiffy when it comes to Palestine, and have made serious mistakes there. These are live images that we can bring you from Gaza, by the way. But the fact is that they've said all the right things on Israel. With the exception of one or two Fruit Loops who attend the odd fringe event, it's basically been, we stand full square behind Israel. And there you go. So none of the kind of hysteria and controversy that, frankly, would have obviously mired this entire conference if Jeremy Corbyn had still been in power. So they managed to avoid that. That is live footage from Gaza. We'll have more on this on GB News throughout the course of the evening. So far, the latest death tolls are in excess of 1,000 Israelis and around 830 Palestinians. But the bombardment of Gaza does continue, although not in that particular little bit of it right now. And also, we understand that Hamas terrorists have also stormed back into Israel. Reports of some very, very, very distressing scenes taking place there. Hamas have reportedly breached the Gaza border again. Terrorists from that group are allegedly running through local towns and potentially taking more hostages with them as well. Look, thank you very much, everybody. I've been Patrick Christys here at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. I will be back with you in Paddington tomorrow at 3. Up next is Emily Carver in for Jubes.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Outbreaks of rain today across northern parts of the UK. It does clear through during the evening and overnight, and it stays fine in the south today before rain arrives here during the next few days. We've got some weather fronts pushing in, and they are mainly affecting the far north of England, Scotland and Northern Ireland during the evening and the first part of the night. The rain falling onto saturated and in places flooded ground in western Scotland could cause issues, but eventually central belt northwards clears the rain, followed by strong winds and frequent showers. But it's really across Northern Ireland, Northern England, parts of Wales where we'll see that wet weather effect through the night. In the far south, a lot of low cloud and mist returns, so a gloomy start once again here, and that cloud will take some time to lift and break. A few light showers coming along for southern counties of England, but the wettest weather actually for tomorrow will be across Wales, the Midlands, East Anglia, some heavy outbreaks of rain, particularly for the Welsh mountains. Clearer skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, albeit windy, with quite a few showers in the north and northwest of Scotland, and feeling much colder here actually, with 10 to 13 Celsius. A bright start though for much of northern UK on Thursday, perhaps a touch of frost in places. In the south we've got cloud and outbreaks of rain pushing through. That does clear later, so Thursday's mostly fine for many of us. Friday, rain returns in places and colder conditions by the weekend.
it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love